The scent of collard greens and cornbread filled the kitchen, a familiar comfort that did nothing to soothe the tremor in my hands. I stared at the check on the table, the paper a stark white accusation under the warm kitchen light. My signature, or a clever imitation of it, was scrawled above the memo line. The numbers were sharp, unforgiving. $5,000 made out to cash. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had not written this check. I traced the signature with my finger, feeling the slight waver in the ink where the forger had hesitated on the final flourish of the M in Mitchell. It was a masterful attempt, but it was wrong. It felt alien. The front door clicked open and shut. Keys jingled, a light metallic sound that usually signaled the pleasant end of my day. Michael walked in, a leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder. He kicked off his dress shoes by the door, the sound echoing slightly in the sudden quiet of the house. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice bright. He walked toward the kitchen, pulling his phone from his pocket. "You will not believe the day I had. Traffic on the Dan Ryan was an absolute nightmare." He froze when he saw me standing at the table, my expression grim. His eyes flickered from my face down to the check. A mask of confusion settled over his features, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mom, what's wrong? What's that?" he asked, gesturing toward the paper. "You tell me, Michael," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I pushed the check across the polished wood surface of the table. It slid to a stop directly in front of him. He picked it up, his well-groomed hands, the nails clean and trimmed, gripping the white paper. He pretended to study it, a small frown creasing his brow. "It's a check from your account. So, look at the signature. Michael, look at it closely." His gaze dropped. He held it for a long moment. When he looked back up, the practiced innocence was gone, replaced by a flicker of something hard and defensive. "It looks like your signature." "It looks like it," I agreed, my voice low. "But you and I both know I didn't sign it. I haven't used my checkbook in months. I found this tucked into the back." He tossed the check back onto the table. It fluttered down like a dead leaf. "So, you're accusing me of something. Is that what this is? An interrogation? This is your work, isn't it?" I pressed, stepping closer. The air between us crackled with tension. "This signature is a forgery." His face went pale, a stark contrast to the flush on his cheeks. He took a step forward, reaching for the paper again, his movement suddenly frantic. "Mom, it's not what you think. I can explain. I just need it." I pulled the check back, snatching it from his grasp. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You needed what? You needed to steal from me. You forged my signature. Listen to me." His voice cracked, the sound of a dam beginning to break. "I'm in trouble, okay? Real trouble. The bills are piling up and I couldn't ask you again. Not after last time. You get so judgmental. Judgmental." The word tasted like poison. "You think asking where my money is going is judgmental. So, you decided to steal from me instead." Michael's composure shattered completely. He grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter, his knuckles turning white. "It's not stealing. You're my mother. I knew you'd help me if you understood the pressure I'm under." "Understood? Understood what? That my son is a common criminal." The word hit him like a slap. His eyes, the same dark eyes as his father's, flashed with something dangerous. "A criminal? Really? After everything I've been through since Dad died? You think I wanted this?" My chest tightened at the mention of Robert. His death had been a brutal blow to us both, a gaping wound that refused to heal. But Michael had spiraled in ways I couldn't follow, chasing a lifestyle that seemed to swallow money whole. The gambling, the endless spending, the vague lies about where the money went. "Your father always worried about you," I said quietly, the memory sharp and painful. "He worried you loved money more than people don't." Michael's voice turned to ice. "Don't you dare bring Dad into this. He would have understood. He wouldn't have called me a criminal. He would have helped me. By forging checks, by lying." Michael stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then he laughed, a broken, hollow sound that held no humor. It echoed in the pristine kitchen, a sound of pure despair. "You really think this is about one check? One measly $5,000 check? You really have no idea, do you?" Something in his tone, a chilling mix of pity and contempt, made my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" He turned away, walking toward the living room, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Forget it. Just forget everything." I followed him, still clutching the check that had started it all. It felt flimsy, insignificant now. "Michael, what did you mean? What don't I know?" He was shoving things into his bag, his movements jerky and efficient, the actions of someone preparing to flee. His phone charger from the coffee table, a bottle of cologne from the mantel, a small silver frame, a picture of him and Robert that he paused to look at before shoving it deep inside his bag. Michael, answer me. You want answers? He spun around, his eyes blazing with a mixture of rage and desperation. Fine. This isn't the first time, Mom. It's not even close. And honestly, I'm not sorry. The room tilted, my legs felt weak, and I gripped the back of the sofa for support. What are you saying? I'm saying you sit in this house counting your pennies, judging every move I make while I'm drowning out here. Well, congratulations, you finally caught me. How many times? My voice came out as a whisper, thin and ready. Michael paused at the front door, his hand on the knob. He looked back at me, and for a fleeting second I saw something that might have been pity in his eyes. More than you want to know, Mom. Way more. The door slammed behind him. The sound reverberated through the silent house. I walked to the window and watched him stride to his car, his footsteps an angry rhythm on the driveway. The engine roared to life and the red taillights disappeared down the street. I stood alone in my living room, the forged check still clutched in my hand. The train car rocked beneath me, its rhythmic clatter a poor distraction from the words echoing in my head. More than you want to know. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's face twisted with a defiance I'd never seen before. The forged check felt heavy in my jacket pocket, folded and refolded until its creases had worn soft. I had to know. I had to understand how deep this went. The bank building stretched 40 stories into the gray morning sky. A monolith of glass and steel in Chicago's financial district. Inside, the marble floors reflected the cold fluorescent lights, and the low hum of morning business surrounded me. It felt like another world, one of order and rules. A world my son had decided to ignore. I approached the main desk, my heart thudding a nervous beat against my ribs. I need to review my account history, I said to the young man behind the counter. I think there might be some fraudulent activity. He directed me to a small private office, where a man in his late 30s was waiting. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, professional. I'm David Chen, a loan specialist. I understand you have some questions about your account. We sat at his desk, separated by neat stacks of paperwork and a computer screen. He angled toward me. I pulled out the check, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I found this in my kitchen yesterday. I didn't write it. David examined the check, his professional smile faltering for just a moment. I see. Let me pull up your full account profile. His fingers clicked rapidly across the keyboard, the screen filled with numbers and text that I couldn't decipher from my angle. His expression shifted from polite concern to genuine alarm. He scrolled silently for what felt like an eternity. Mrs. Mitchell, he began, his voice carefully neutral. According to our records, you have an active personal loan for $500,000. The words hit me like a splash of ice water. A roaring sound filled my ears. What? That's impossible. I've never taken out a loan that large in my life. The mortgage on my house was paid off years ago. It was approved 6 months ago, ma'am, he said, turning the screen fully toward me. Here's your signature on all the required documents, digital copies. I leaned forward, squinting at the images. There it was, my signature, replicated perfectly, over and over again, on loan applications, on disclosure forms, on agreements I'd never seen, the dates, the amounts, the sheer volume of it. I remembered nothing. This was a nightmare. This is a forgery, I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and distant, as if it belonged to someone else. My son, oh God, what has he done? David's expression softened with genuine sympathy. Mrs. Mitchell, I am so sorry. This is a very serious situation. If these signatures are fraudulent, we need to document everything. Show me, I said, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Show me everything. For the next 20 minutes, he walked me through a systematic trail of financial destruction. The $500,000 loan was just the beginning. There were credit cards opened in my name, their balances maxed out. There were smaller personal loans from affiliate lenders, cash advances, overdraft protections that had been triggered again and again, all of it bearing my forged signature, all of it approved because my credit score, the score Robert and I had spent 40 years building, had been spotless. The total exposure is approximately $700,000. David said gently, his voice barely a whisper. My vision blurred. $700,000. My entire retirement savings, the equity in my house, everything Robert and I had worked for, every double shift, every saved penny, Everything we had built over a lifetime of wiped out by our own son. When did this start? I asked, my throat tight. He clicked back through the records. The first transaction was 11 months ago. A small credit card, just a $5,000 limit. It escalated quickly from there. 11 months ago, right after Robert's funeral, the time when Michael had been so devastated, so lost, the time I'd been trying to comfort him, holding him while he cried, telling him we'd get through it together. All the while, he'd been planning this. What are my options? I asked, my mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the betrayal. David handed me a thick stack of paper copies. The evidence of my ruin. You'll need to file police reports for identity theft and fraud. The bank will launch its own internal investigation. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But Mrs. Mitchell, this level of systematic fraud, especially when perpetrated by a close family member, it's going to be complicated, very complicated. I stood up on unsteady legs, clutching the documents to my chest. The bank's air conditioning felt arctic against my skin. Thank you, I managed to say. Mrs. Mitchell, he called out as I reached the door. I'm required to inform you that several of these loans are already in default. You'll be receiving legal notices soon. The elevator ride down seemed to take forever. When I finally stepped out onto the sidewalk, the summer heat hit me like a physical blow. People streamed past, talking on phones, carrying coffee, living their normal lives, while mine had just crumbled around me. I looked down at the papers in my hands, the story of my son's betrayal printed in stark black and white. I stumbled through my front door, the house feeling alien and unsafe. Every shadow seemed to mock me. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter with a sharp clatter that echoed in the silence. The same table where I'd found that first check just 24 hours ago now served as the stage for my entire financial ruin. I spread the bank documents across its surface, a collage of deceit, $700,000. I arranged the papers chronologically, creating a timeline of Michael's deception. November 2024, the first credit card. December, a personal loan for $20,000. January, another card. And then February, the big one, the $500,000 mortgage taken out against my house. My house. The one Robert and I had bought as newlyweds, the place we'd brought Michael home from the hospital, the room where Robert had taken his last breath. The weight of it all was crushing me. I put the documents into my old leather briefcase, snapped the lock shut, and carried it to my small home office. It was the only room in the house with a proper lock. I placed the briefcase under my desk, locked the office door, and pocketed the key. It was a flimsy defense, but it was all I had. The papers were the only proof. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the numbers and forged signatures burning behind my eyelids. Every creak of the old house made me jump. Sometime after 2 a.m., I heard it. A faint scraping sound from downstairs. My heart leaped into my throat. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Maybe it was just the house settling. Then I heard it again. A soft metallic click, the sound of a lock turning. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find on my nightstand, an old glass paperweight Robert had given me. It felt cold and solid in my palm. My mind raced. Was it a burglar? Had Michael's trouble followed him here? I crept down the stairs. Each step, a carefully placed movement. The downstairs was dark, but a sliver of moonlight cut through the living room window, illuminating a path to my office. The door was slightly ajar. The door I had locked. A cold dread washed over me. I pushed it open. The room was a disaster. Papers were swept from my desk. Drawers were pulled out, their contents dumped on the floor. In the center of the chaos, moonlight glinted off the two broken latches of my briefcase. It was open and it was empty. The documents were gone. All of them. My breath hitched. The front door was still locked. I checked the windows, all secure. Then I saw it. A faint scratch mark on the frame of the back door in the kitchen. He had a key. Of course, he had a key. He hadn't needed to break in. He just let himself in, like he owned the place and stolen the only evidence I had against him. The violation was absolute. This wasn't just about money anymore. He had come back into this house, his childhood home, like a thief in the night. He had rifled through my private space and taken the proof of his crimes, leaving me with nothing but my word against his. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me, so potent it left me shaking. I didn't even bother to change. I threw on a jacket over my nightgown, grabbed my car keys, and stormed out into the pre-dawn chill. The streets were empty, the city still asleep as I sped towards downtown Chicago, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The rage was a living thing inside me, a fire burning away every last shred of maternal affection. I leaned on the buzzer to his apartment, building until a sleepy security guard answered. I flashed my driver's license. I'm Michael Mitchell's mother. It's an emergency. He let me in, his expression a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. I pounded on his apartment door, not caring who I woke up. Michael, open this door. I know you're in there. It took a full minute before the door opened to a crack, held by a security chain. Michael peered out, his face pale and his hair a mess. He was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. Mom, what are you doing here? It's 4 o'clock in the morning. You know damn well what I'm doing here, I snarled, pushing against the door. Let me in. No, you're acting crazy. Go home. The documents, Michael, the ones you stole from my office tonight, where are they? His eyes widened in what looked like genuine fear. Stole? What are you talking about? I was asleep. Don't lie to me. I rattled the door. You broke into my house. You ransacked my office and you took that briefcase. The chain slid free and he opened the door, stepping back. His apartment was immaculate, not a thing out of place. There was no sign of my briefcase. He wrapped his arms around himself, looking small and vulnerable. It was a performance I knew, but it was a damn good one. Mom, I swear to you, I didn't do this, he said, his voice trembling. Then the tears started to fall, silent at first, then turning into racking sobs. He collapsed onto his sofa, burying his face in his hands. Oh God, he did it. He must have done it. I stood there, my anger momentarily checked by this new, confusing display. Who is he? He looked up at me, his face a mask of terror. This was it, the start of the next lie, the next manipulation. I could feel it. I didn't want to tell you, Michael sobbed, pulling a throw pillow into his lap and hugging it like a shield. I was too scared. I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I asked, my voice flat. I wasn't buying it, not for a second. But I had to see how far he would take this. The money, he whispered, his eyes darting around the room, as if he expected someone to burst through the walls. I didn't steal it for myself. Not really. I was forced to. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. Forced by who? A man, he said, his voice dropping lower. A loan shark. His name is Vince. He said the name as if it tasted foul. I got into some trouble a while back. A bad investment. I borrowed money from him. Just a little at first. But the interest, it just kept growing. I couldn't keep up. He painted a vivid picture of a ruthless predator, a man who preyed on the desperate. He claimed Vince was the one who came up with the idea of forging my signature, of taking out the loans. He said he threatened him, threatened me. He was his puppet, a victim trapped in an impossible situation. He was the one who broke into your office. Mom, he insisted, his eyes wide with manufactured fear. He must have followed you from the bank yesterday. He knew you had the documents. He took them to cover his tracks, to destroy the evidence that links back to him. He was good. He was terrifyingly good. Every detail was crafted to elicit sympathy, to shift the blame, to paint himself as a victim in distress. My rage was cooling, replaced by a chilling clarity. This was a game to him. Where can I find this Vince? I asked, playing along. He hesitated, chewing on his lower lip. You can't go after him, Mom. He's dangerous. These are not good people. Give me the address, Michael. He finally relented, scribbling an address on a piece of paper from a notepad by his phone. It's a warehouse down in the South Loop, he said, his voice laced with fake concern. It's where he runs his operation. But please, please be careful. If he knows you're coming. I took the piece of paper. The address felt like a prop in a poorly written play. I looked at my son, this stranger with a familiar face, and felt nothing but a profound hollow emptiness. I'll be careful. A sliver of hope, a stupid, irrational sliver, fought against my better judgment as I drove towards the South Loop. What if he was telling the truth? What if he was just a scared kid who got in over his head? It was a mother's desperate wish, a final flickering ember of denial against the cold, hard reality I knew to be true. The address led me to the desolate industrial wasteland near the old South Loop warehouses. Rusted chain-link fences topped with barbed wire surrounded crumbling brick buildings. The streets were potholed and littered with debris. The sun was beginning to rise, casting long, eerie shadows across the abandoned landscape. It was the perfect setting for a trap. I parked my car a block away and approached on foot, my senses on high alert. The air smelled of rust and decay. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the distinct feeling of being watched. I scanned the dark windows of the surrounding buildings but saw nothing. The warehouse was at the end of a dead-end street, number 47. The windows were boarded up and a heavy, padlocked chain was wrapped around the large corrugated metal doors. There was no sign of life. This wasn't a loan shark's headquarters. This was a tomb. I circled the building looking for any other entrance. Around the back, a smaller service door hung slightly ajar, its lock long since rusted away. I pushed it open, the screech of protesting metal echoing in the vast, empty space inside. The interior was a cavern of shadows and dust. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the roof, illuminating dancing motes of dust. Piles of rotting pallets and old, disused machinery were scattered across the concrete floor. There was no Vince, there was no one. Then I saw it. In the center of the floor, placed deliberately in a single beam of light, was a small white envelope. My name, Dorothy, was written on it in thick black marker. My blood ran cold. This was a setup. He knew I would come here. With trembling hands, I picked it up and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a threatening note typed in a generic font. Stay away from what isn't yours. Michael's debt is his own. Meddle and you'll pay it for him. It was a plant, a piece of stagecraft designed to corroborate his ridiculous story, and I had walked right into it. The last flicker of hope died, extinguished by the cold, hard proof of his manipulation. I had been played for a fool. I crumpled the note in my fist, the sound of the paper a pathetic crackle in the immense silence of the warehouse. Humiliation and fury washed over me in equal measure. I stumbled out of the warehouse, blinking in the strengthening morning light. The world seemed sharper, colder. The feeling of being watched was gone. The show was over. I was the only one in the audience. I walked back to my car, my movements stiff, robotic. I got in and just sat there for a long time, staring at the derelict building. He hadn't just stolen my money. He hadn't just stolen the evidence. He had tried to steal my reality, to twist it into a shape where he was the victim and I was the bumbling fool meant to clean up his mess. He had sent me here to this dangerous, abandoned place without a second thought for my safety. That was the final straw. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the cold, calculated cruelty of the act. He wasn't just desperate. He was malicious. He saw me not as his mother, but as a resource to be exploited, a pawn to be moved around his personal chessboard. The love I felt for my son, the deep instinctual bond that had defined so much of my life, curdled into something else. Something hard and unforgiving. The woman who had driven to the South Loop hoping for a miracle was gone. The woman who drove away was on a new mission. It wasn't about saving Michael anymore. It was about stopping him. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was him. The timing was perfect. Of course, I let it ring once, twice, then answered, my voice devoid of all emotion. Mom. His voice was a perfect imitation of a frightened child. Are you okay? Did you go there? Did you find him? I went there, I said, my voice as cold as steel. What happened? Did you talk to him? Is everything okay? There's no Vince, Michael, I said evenly. There's no loan shark. There's just an empty warehouse and a very stupid, very theatrical note. Silence stretched on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he scrambled for a new lie. Mom, I don't save it. I cut him off. The game is over. You stole the documents. You sent me on a wild goose chase. You lied about everything. His tone shifted instantly, the fake fear replaced by the familiar sharp edge of anger. You don't know anything. You have no idea what my life is like. I know that my son is a thief and a liar, I said, the words coming out with a brutal finality. And I'm done. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The sun was fully up now, glinting off the windshield. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. They'd believe him, over me, a grieving old woman with no evidence. I needed someone who understood criminals. I needed Linda. Linda's apartment smelled of coffee and old paperwork, a scent I'd associated with her for 30 years. She opened the door before I could knock, her weathered face creasing with immediate concern. Dorothy, you look like hell, she said, her voice a low, steady rumble. She stepped aside, gesturing me into her small kitchen. What's happened? I sank into a chair at her worn wooden table. The rage from the morning had simmered down into a kind of weary, desperate resolve. He did it, Linda, all of it. She poured 2 cups of coffee, black for both of us, and sat down across from me. Her sharp eyes, the same ones that had interrogated countless suspects during her years on the force, focused on me with unnerving intensity. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her everything. The first check, the horrifying visit to the bank, the discovery of the $700,000 debt, and then the newest, most painful parts, the break-in, the stolen documents, the wild goose chase to the abandoned warehouse, and the planted note. Linda listened without interruption, her expression growing grimmer with every word. She didn't seem surprised, which somehow made it worse. So, let me get this straight, she said finally, after I had finished. He stole 700 grand, and when you got the proof, he broke into your house, stole it back, and then sent you to a deserted warehouse district in the middle of the night on a phony story about a loan shark. I nodded numbly. That about covers it. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing a hand over her tired face. Dorothy, this isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is felony fraud, breaking and entering, filing a false report if you'd gone to the cops with that story. This boy is out of control. But I have no proof, Linda, I said, the helplessness of it all washing over me again. He took everything. It's my word against his. Who are they going to believe? A respected young man, or his confused, grieving mother? That's what he's counting on, Linda said, her voice hard. He's banking on the fact that you're his mother, and that you won't or can't fight back effectively. She stood up and began to pace the small kitchen, her old cop instincts kicking in. You still have one thing, Dorothy, your testimony. And the bank has its own records of the fraud. But what do? I can't put my own child in prison. Even after everything, the thought was a physical pain. Linda stopped pacing and looked at me, her expression softening slightly. I know this is hard. He's your son. But you need to think about what he is now. He's a predator. He sent you into a potentially dangerous situation without a second thought. What's next? What happens when he drains you completely? Who is his next victim? She was right. The question hung in the air between us, heavy and terrifying. You have to file a police report, Linda urged, to get this documented officially. Even without the papers you had, your testimony and the bank's investigation will be a starting point. You need to create a legal record to protect yourself. I stared into my coffee cup, the black liquid a swirling void. The thought of walking into a police station, of telling strangers that my son, my Michael, was a thief and a con artist, it made my stomach turn. I can't, I whispered. Not yet. I need to think. Linda nodded slowly, but I caught something in her expression, a quick, sharp calculation. It was the look she used to get when she was planning how to approach a difficult case, how to outmaneuver a cornered suspect. Okay, Dorothy, she said, her voice calm again. Take your time, but promise me something. Don't talk to him alone. Don't let him talk you into anything stupid. Don't sign anything. Don't give him access to any more of your life. Cut him off completely. I will, I promised. She walked me to the door, her hand heavy on my shoulder. You're a good mother, but he's using that against you. Don't let him. As I walked home, I felt a sliver of relief. I had a plan, or at least the start of one. I would cut him off, protect what little I had left, and figure out my next move. I didn't see Linda return to her kitchen. I didn't see her pick up her phone and dial a number from memory. I didn't see the determined, grim expression that settled over her weathered face as she started making calls. Some choices, I was about to learn, get made for you. 3 days passed in an agonizing silence. I followed Linda's advice and blocked Michael's number. I changed the locks on my doors. The house felt like a fortress, but also a prison. Every ring of the landline, a number I hadn't blocked, made my heart leap with a toxic mix of hope and dread. I waited, not knowing what I was waiting for, an apology, a confession, some sign that the son I'd raised still existed somewhere inside the stranger who had so thoroughly betrayed me. On Thursday evening, as I sat picking at a tasteless microwave dinner, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Mom, it was him. His voice was completely different. It was soft, hesitant, almost shy. The aggressive, cornered animal was gone, replaced by a lost little boy. I've been thinking about our last conversation, he said quietly. I nearly dropped the phone. The sudden shift was dizzying. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I know, he whispered. And I'm so sorry about that. I was angry and scared, and I said things I didn't mean. Horrible things. He paused, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. I've been doing a lot of soul searching these past few days. My heart began to pound with something that felt dangerously like hope. Have you? I realize I hurt you. Really, really hurt you, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, and I want to make everything right. The words were everything I had been longing to hear. They were a balm on a raw wound. I wanted to believe them so badly. I want that, too, sweetheart. Can you come for dinner tomorrow night? He asked, his voice gaining a little strength. I'll cook your favorite, that pot roast with the potatoes you always loved when Dad made it. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Robert's pot roast. Michael hadn't cooked that for me since the funeral. It was a powerful symbol, a deliberate olive branch. Of course, I said, my own voice thick. I knew you'd understand eventually, he said, a wave of relief in his tone. And Mom, bring all those papers from the bank, the copies they gave you. We'll go through everything together, line by line, and figure out a plan to fix this mess. I need to face it. The relief flooding through me was so intense, I had to sit down. Really, you mean that? I mean it, he said. 7 o'clock tomorrow, okay? And Mom, yes, I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I really, really do. After he hung up, I sat in my silent kitchen, a wide, foolish grin spreading across my face. Linda was wrong. People could change. My Michael, the real Michael, was coming back. He was remorseful, ready to take responsibility. The harsh, cruel man from our previous conversations must have been fear-talking, the panic of being caught. This was the son I remembered. We were going to fix this together. The next evening, I put on my best navy dress, the one Robert always said made me look elegant. I even bought a bouquet of yellow roses, Michael's favorite. The leather briefcase containing the photocopies of the bank documents felt heavy in my hand, but it was a weight of purpose now, not despair. This was the key to our reconciliation. Traffic was light, and I found parking right outside his building. Everything seemed to be falling into place. As I rode the elevator to his floor, I caught myself humming, something I hadn't done in months. The smell of pot roast hit me as soon as Michael opened the door, and for a moment, it felt like stepping back in time. Mom, he said, hugging me tightly. I noticed he'd cleaned up nicely, wearing the blue button-down shirt I'd bought him last Christmas. His apartment was warm and inviting. The dining table was set with his good dishes, candles flickering between 2 glasses of red wine. He'd even put out fresh flowers. It was a perfect picture of familial harmony. This looks wonderful, Michael, I said, handing him the roses. I wanted it to be special, he said, his smile radiant. A new beginning for us. He took the briefcase from my hand, setting it carefully on a side table. We'll look at all that after dinner. Okay, first, let's just be us. We sat across from each other at the elegant table. The pot roast tasted just like Robert's. We talked about trivial things, work, the weather, a movie he'd seen. It felt normal, almost painfully so. But something was off. Michael kept glancing at the briefcase, and I noticed stacks of bills peeking out from beneath a magazine on his coffee table. Credit card statements, overdue notices, the debris of his financial chaos barely hidden. So, he said after we'd finished eating, his leg bouncing nervously under the table, how much did you say the total was? $700,000, I replied. But Michael, the important thing is that we're going to solve this together. He nodded quickly. Too quickly. Absolutely. That's exactly what I want to discuss. He leaned forward, his expression shifting, the warmth draining away to be replaced by something more calculated, more businesslike. Here's what I need from you, Mom. The phrasing caught me off guard. What I need from you. To pay back that money, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. I'll need some capital to get started. Seed money for the repayment plan. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. The pot roast suddenly turned to ash. Seed money? Just a small loan, he said, as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. Maybe $100,000 to begin with. I have some investment opportunities, high yield, that could generate the income to pay you back much more quickly. It's the only logical way. I set down my fork, staring at my son across the candlelit table. The warm, inviting scene had become a cold, surreal nightmare. Are you seriously asking me for more money? I'm proposing a business solution, he said, his mask of sweetness slipping away completely. You want your money back, right? This is how we make that happen. You have to spend money to make money. I pushed my chair back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I'm being You committed multiple felonies against me. Everything I did was for survival, he shot back, standing up as well, his face finally cracking with raw, ugly greed. You have no idea what it's like to live in this city, to maintain any kind of decent life. So, you decided to destroy mine instead. I decided to use resources that were ultimately going to be mine anyway. He gestured wildly around his expensive apartment. When you die, I inherit everything. I just needed access to some of it now. The words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't my son. This was a monster wearing his face, coldly calculating my death as a financial inconvenience. The pot roast, the shirt, the I love you, it was all a trap. A performance designed to lure me here so he could try to fleece me for another $100,000. Get out, he said suddenly, his voice flat and cold. What? Get out of my apartment. Take your moral outrage and your self-righteousness and leave. He moved toward the side table where my briefcase sat. And leave these documents with me. I'll handle them. No, I said, moving toward it as well. They're coming with me. I reached for the briefcase, but he was closer. Our hands collided on the leather handle. Give me that, I demanded. No. His grip tightened, his fingers digging into my hand. I think I'll keep these. You clearly can't be trusted with them. We stood there, locked in a pathetic struggle over the evidence of his crimes, our faces inches apart. In his eyes, I saw nothing of the little boy who used to beg for bedtime stories. Only cold calculation and a barely controlled rage. This was who he was. This was the real Michael. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. I ignored it. Then the apartment door burst open. 2 uniformed police officers and a detective in a dark suit filled the doorway. Michael Mitchell, the detective said, his voice calm and authoritative. You're under arrest. For a second, nobody moved. The scene was frozen. Michael and I locked in, our absurd tout voir over the briefcase, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows, and the 3 officers standing in the doorway like grim specters. Michael's face went from rage to shock to pure unadulterated panic in the span of a heartbeat. He let go of the briefcase, as if it were arrest. For what? This is my mother. We were just having a disagreement. The detective, a woman with tired eyes and a nonsense demeanor named Rivera, stepped into the apartment. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of grand larceny, identity theft, and bank fraud. She glanced at the briefcase, then at me. I take it these are the documents in question? I nodded numbly, my mind reeling. How did they know? The 2 uniformed officers moved past her. One of them gently but firmly took Michael's arm. Sir, please put your hands behind your back. No, get off me, Michael shrieked, trying to pull away. The transformation was instantaneous. The calculating businessman and the remorseful son both vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. Mom, do something. Tell them they're making a mistake. I couldn't speak. I just stood there clutching the briefcase, watching the nightmare unfold. You have the right to remain silent, the officer said, clicking handcuffs around his wrists. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As they led him toward the door, he twisted his head to look back at me, his eyes blazing with a venomous hatred that chilled me to the bone. You did this. You called them. I hate you. I hate you. His screams echoed down the hallway as they took him away. The apartment, which had felt so warm and inviting just minutes before, was now cold and silent, save for the movements of Detective Rivera and a forensics team that had begun to file in. Police officers moved through the room with methodical precision, their cameras flashing as they documented the scene. One of them carefully took the briefcase from my hands, tagging it as evidence. I stood by the window watching them work, my phone still buzzing in my pocket. I finally pulled it out. It was the text I'd received just before the police arrived. A message from an unknown number. Turn on camera. There's going to be a show now. Mrs. Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell. Detective Rivera approached me, her notebook ready. We'll need a formal statement about the crimes committed against you. I nodded, still unable to process how quickly everything had changed. Detective, how did you know? How did you know to come here tonight? The timing. Rivera exchanged a glance with her partner, then offered a small, knowing smile. You have very caring friends, Mrs. Mitchell. Someone called in a tip about ongoing financial fraud. They suggested tonight would be a particularly fruitful time to make an arrest. A friend? I asked, my mind racing. Someone with law enforcement experience, Rivera confirmed. carefully bagging a stack of the overdue bills from his coffee table. They'd been conducting their own off-the-books investigation, felt it was time for official intervention. They coordinated with us to ensure everything was handled by the book. And then I knew it could only be one person: Linda. The taxi ride back to the South Side felt surreal. The flashing lights of downtown Chicago blurred past the window, but I saw nothing. My oldest friend had orchestrated my son's arrest. She had gone behind my back and done the one thing I couldn't bring myself to do. I didn't know whether to feel betrayed or grateful. Back home, I sat in my dark living room, surrounded by the family photos I'd looked at just that morning, full of foolish hope. Robert's smiling face looked down at me from the mantel. What would he think of all this? I picked up my phone. The mysterious text message was still on the screen. Turn on camera. It made perfect sense now. Linda had wanted video evidence of his confession, of his demands for more money, of his complete and utter lack of remorse. She'd orchestrated the entire sting operation. My finger hovered over her contact number. I pressed call. She answered on the first ring. Linda, I said, my voice flat. You organized the arrest, didn't you? There was no hesitation in her voice. Yes, Dorothy, I did. The direct admission still hit me like a punch, even though I'd known it was true. Why, Linda, why didn't you tell me? Because you never would have done it yourself, she said. Her tone mattered. You love him too much to see clearly. You would have kept giving him chances until he bled you dry and left you with nothing. How long have you been planning this? Since the day you left my apartment, she admitted. I could see it in your eyes. You were never going to press charges. You were never going to protect yourself. So I decided to protect you instead. Her voice carried the same calm authority she'd used during her 25 years on the force. I followed him, Dorothy, for 3 days. The revelation stunned me. You followed Michael? He was meeting with other women. Dorothy, elderly women mostly, looked like he was scouting them. He was already working on his next targets while he was busy manipulating you for more money. Papers rustled on her end of the line. I documented everything: the meetings, the locations, the pattern of behavior. I have photos. My coffee mug from that morning sat forgotten on the kitchen table, growing cold, while Linda explained how she'd spent the past few days gathering evidence like the detective she'd always been. I contacted Detective Rivera on Tuesday, she continued. She's an old colleague of mine, a good woman. I showed her the copies of the bank documents you'd left at my place, plus my surveillance photos. Turns out they had a file on someone matching Michael's profile, suspected of elder fraud in another neighborhood. My evidence connected the dots. The text message, I said, that was you. I needed them to have irrefutable proof of his state of mind, Linda explained. I needed them to see him in action, to hear him demanding more money, to witness that he had no intention of making restitution. I was watching from my car across the street, Dorothy, when I saw him grab your briefcase, saw the argument escalating. I sent the text and called Rivera. The team was already in place, waiting for my signal. I walked to my window, looking out at the quiet South Side street where Linda and I had been neighbors for 20 years. She had done all this for me. You could have told me, I said again, though it sounded weaker this time. No, I couldn't, she said, her tone softening slightly. You would have tried to stop me. You would have warned him. You would have found some way to sabotage your own protection. Sometimes friends have to protect each other even when it hurts. He's going to prison, I said, the reality of it finally sinking in. He belongs in prison, Linda countered, her voice firm again. Dorothy, if I hadn't acted, you'd be bankrupt within a year. He was destroying you and moving on to other victims. How many other families should suffer because you can't face the truth about your own son? The words stung because they were true. I would have kept hoping, kept believing he could change, right up until he had destroyed me completely. What happens now? I asked, suddenly exhausted. Now you testify when the time comes, she said. You tell the truth. The prosecution has a solid case, especially with my surveillance and the recording from the arrest. They'll probably offer him a plea deal to avoid a messy trial. I sat back down at the kitchen table. I don't know how to feel about this, Linda. Feel grateful that someone cared enough to do what you couldn't, she said gently. Feel relieved that your financial future is secure, and feel proud that you're finally holding him accountable. A long silence sat between us. Will you come to the hearing with me? I asked. Of course, she said without hesitation. We'll face this together, just like we faced everything else. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. Linda had risked our friendship to save me from myself. Robert had always said she was the best friend a person could have. Now, in the quiet ruin of my family, I finally understood why. 3 weeks later, Linda picked me up in her old Camry and we drove together toward the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago. The building rose before us like a monument to consequences, its limestone columns stark against the July morning sky. My best navy dress felt formal and foreign after weeks of sleepless nights and quiet, empty days. "Ready for this?" Linda asked, straightening her own jacket as we climbed the imposing steps. "As I'll ever be," I said. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, wood-paneled and serious. Michael sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his hair cut short. He looked thin, diminished, nothing like the polished, confident man who had served me pot roast and lies. He didn't look at me when I entered and took a seat in the front row with Linda. Judge Thomas Bradford presided with a quiet, unyielding authority. His gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses gave him the appearance of someone who had seen every possible kind of human failing and was no longer surprised by any of it. After the prosecution laid out the case, a brutal, concise summary of Michael's calculated deception backed by bank records, Linda's surveillance photos, and a transcript of his demands during the dinner, the judge turned his gaze to me. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his voice even, "would you like to provide a victim impact statement?" Linda gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. I stood on unsteady legs, the prepared speech trembling in my hands. I looked at the paper, then folded it and put it in my purse. "I would speak from the heart, Your Honor," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "For 11 months, my son systematically dismantled my life. He stole $700,000. He forged my signature dozens of times, opened accounts in my name, and mortgaged the house where I raised him, the house where his father died." I paused, taking a breath. "But the financial damage, as devastating as it is, isn't the worst part. The worst part is the betrayal. He destroyed my trust. He manipulated my love for him. He showed no remorse, not a single ounce of it, until he was caught. And even then," I glanced at Michael's rigid back. "His first instinct was to demand more money instead of offering to make things right." Michael's shoulders shook slightly, but he still didn't turn around. "I love my son," I concluded, the words catching in my throat, "but I cannot and will not enable his destructive behavior anymore. He needs to face the consequences of his choices. He needs to learn that actions have repercussions, for his sake and for the sake of anyone else he might have harmed." I asked the court to hold him accountable. I sat down, my body trembling with the aftermath of the emotional release. When Michael was finally allowed to speak, he stood slowly, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry," he whispered, reading from a prepared statement. "I'm sorry for what I did to my mother. I was desperate, and I made terrible choices." But even his apology felt hollow, calculated, words practiced during weeks in custody rather than felt in the heart. Judge Bradford's sentencing was comprehensive and final. He looked directly at Michael. "Mr. Mitchell, your crimes were not born of a single moment of desperation. They were a calculated, prolonged, and cruel campaign of fraud against the person who should have been able to trust you most in this world. You exploited her love and her grief for your own selfish gain. Therefore," the judge continued, his voice ringing with authority, "you are hereby sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for identity theft, document forgery, and bank fraud. You are also ordered to provide full restitution to the victim in the amount of $700,000. The gavel came down with a sharp, final crack, a sound like a door closing forever, as two marshals moved to lead Michael away. He finally turned and looked at me. His eyes were cold, devoid of tears or remorse, filled only with a quiet, simmering rage. "I hope you're happy now," he said, his voice low and bitter. "I hope you learn responsibility," I replied, the words tasting like ashdot outside the courthouse. Linda and I walked slowly down the steps, the summer heat washing over us. "Justice has been served," my friend Linda said simply. I nodded, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't happiness. There was nothing happy about this day. There was nothing happy about watching your only child be sent to prison. But there was peace, a quiet, profound peace, born from the end of a long and painful war. The lies were over. The manipulation was over. The scales had finally been balanced. "Thank you, Linda," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name, "for doing what I couldn't." "That's what friends are for," she replied. We walked toward her car. Two old women who had learned that sometimes the hardest form of love is the one that refuses to enable, the one that demands accountability. Robert would have understood. He'd always known that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was just another form of harm. Michael would serve his time. I would rebuild. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I could finally breathe again.